In this demonstration, I'm going to go over 3 color modes that you will be using frequently at the beginning of learning your Photoshop journey. So those 3 color modes we're going to start with are RGB, CMYK, and Grayscale. We're going to talk about RGB color model, CMYK, primarily used for print, and talk about converting a photo to grayscale and mimicking black and white photography. So let's start by looking at an image that I already have open. So here's this lunar eclipse image that you may be familiar with, have seen before. This eclipse image right now is in RGB mode. I can tell this by looking at the tab above the image window, and I can see that it's scaled to 100% and that it is in RGB mode at 8 bits color. Now if I want to change that mode, I go under Image, Mode, and change it to CMYK color. Photoshop does a much better job than it did way back when in the beginning of Photoshop in converting images from RGB to CMYK. It used to be that RGB images were much more saturated and much more rich color available. And you can kind of see how that would be because printers, as they mix different amounts of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black inks, some colors, some vibrant colors are not available, or they're outside of the gamut of the color that can be mixed. So let's see if we can create a color in which we get a warning. Let's see. As we're creating a color, and we can move about in the color picker as well. And you can see that the color that I'm selecting actually changes from the current color. You can see the new color that we're mixing as we mix that color. Now here I've gotten a warning. And that warning is that this color that I have selected, which is a very bright and vibrant color, is outside of the gamut that a typical printing press can print. So to get to the closest possible color that could be printed in a CMYK setting, I can click on that exclamation point and it'll adjust that color to take out some of the saturation and vibrance and put it to the nearest neighbor or the nearest possible color that could be printed. So that's a demonstration of how the CMYK color model was a little bit more limited than the RGB color model, and why sometimes when you had a very vibrant and saturated image and you converted it to CMYK for print, it could sometimes look less vibrant, desaturated, and didn't have as much punch in the colors. But now Photoshop is much more advanced and printing presses have also advanced. And so the differences between RGB and CMYK have gotten smaller and smaller. So let's practice switching modes between RGB and CMYK. You can open up an image going under File, Open, and practice on your own, just switching between RGB and CMYK color. And that warning that keeps coming up when I switch from RGB and then I go back into image mode and CMYK, it says you are about to convert to CMYK using this default web-coded swap version 2 profile. And this is the default that comes with Adobe Photoshop. In 98% of printing cases, this has been fine to use this default, so you can click on OK and not worry so much about that warning. Another color mode that you might want to experiment with is black and white. Some of you may be familiar with Photoshop and may have actually played with image adjustments like desaturate desaturate can, well, this case looks a little bit sepia tone, but sometimes it can be pretty close to throwing out the color information and creating a black and white photo. In this case, it just desaturated or added lots of gray. If you remember from the hue, saturation, and brightness color slider, and as we add more gray to a color, we're desaturating it. So if it added gray to the colors that were on screen, this is the result of a desaturated image. But if you really truly want to create or mimic a black and white photography image, you go under Image, Mode, and select Grayscale. It's going to ask you if you want to discard the color information. You say OK. And there we have created a grayscale image suitable for black and white photography. So if you would, open an image and practice switching between the color modes. RGB, which is an additive color model. It refers to adding the amount of pigment or hue or the color that we see on screen. It sort of mimics. So that's an additive color model. Or the mode of CMYK, a subtractive color model, more closely related to printing press because it refers to using these different percentages of translucent inks on the printing press, starting from 100%, and we subtract the amount of ink for each of these ink colors and get the result. And so all of these ink colors, this closely mimics the result that would occur on the printing press. And that covers changing between image modes, RGB, CMYK, and grayscale image modes.